The Torah tells us that we can't eat milk and meat together. Lo tevashel gedi b'chalev imo. We can't cook a kid in its mother's milk, which the Talmud understands to mean that we can't cook milk and meat together at the same time. The rabbis added in a gezerah, a rabbinical decree, that we have to wait after eating meat before we eat milk. The question is, how long must one wait in between meat and milk? In the Gemara, it says that the standard practice was to wait bein seuda l'seuda, between one meal and the next. And the question that the commentaries, the Rishonim, ask is, what does this mean to wait between one meal and the next? There are different ways of interpreting that statement. So some suggest, this is the approach of the Rambam, Maimonides, and others, that the amount of time is roughly 6 hours. The Rambam says, kamo sheish sha'ot, like 6 hours between one meal and the next. Apparently the Rambam understood that the time frame between one meal and the next refers to a regular average amount of time that one would wait between a meal, let's say lunch in the afternoon, and eating supper in the evening. And the Rambam says that standard time is kamo sheish sha'ot, about 6 hours. On the other hand, there are other opinions, such as Tosfot on the Gemara in Chulin, who claims that you don't really need to wait that long. He says as long as you wait the amount of time it takes to finish one meal, and then let's say you want to start another meal immediately afterwards, that's sufficient. So Tosfot explains that all you really need to do is finish the first meal, recite Birkat HaMazon, clear off the table. In those times they had little tables that they would take away after every meal. So Tosfot says you would take away the little table that has the food, and then afterwards you can already come back and have a new meal. According to Tosfot, you can eat meat at the first meal, finish the meal, bench, say Birkat HaMazon, take the table away, and immediately begin eating dairy afterwards. It seems that Tosfot understood that when the Gemara refers to bein seuda l'seuda, between one meal and the next, it doesn't mean an average amount of time that most people wait between one meal and the next. Rather, Tosfot claims that as long as you finish your first meal and actually start the second meal, whenever you actually start the second meal, that is sufficient. You can already eat dairy immediately afterwards. That debate continues in the later Rishonim, in the later commentaries, and makes its way into the Shulchan Aruch of Rav Yosef Karo, the Code of Jewish Law. In the Shulchan Aruch, Rav Yosef Karo says that one needs to wait 6 hours in between eating meat before eating dairy, and he is following the opinion of the Rambam. However, the Ramah, Rav Moshe Isserles, who generally reports the custom of Ashkenazi Jewry, says that really some people hold that you don't have to wait 6 hours, you simply need to wait in between one meal and when you actually start the next meal, even if it's immediately afterwards. The only thing that you need to do is bench, clear off the table, and he adds in also from Tosfot that you may need to also wash your hands and rinse out your mouth in between. The Ramah says that in his locales, in his areas of Europe in the 1500s, the custom was actually to wait 1 hour in between meat and milk, which is a little bit more the amount of time that Tosfot requires, because Tosfot said you just need to start your next meal. The Ramah says their custom was to wait about 1 hour, and presumably the idea here was just simply to make sure that people don't get confused and don't begin to eat milk and meat at the same time. So they waited an hour. In the conclusion of the Ramah's comments, though, the Ramah says that the Medaktikim, those that are careful, actually wait 6 hours, and then he says, V'chein nachol la'asot, and this is appropriate to do. So the conclusion of the Ramah is that even though Ashkenazic custom, according to the strict halacha, the strict ruling of Jewish law, should be that simply waiting a short amount of time and starting another meal is sufficient, nevertheless, the Ramah recommends and praises those individuals that actually wait 6 hours in between meat and dairy, and says this is what's appropriate to do. Many of the commentaries following the Ramah, reporting again the practice of Ashkenazi Jewry, say that this is indeed appropriate as the halacha for our days, that Ashkenazic Jews should also wait 6 hours in between meat and milk. So the bottom line here is, according to the Shulchan Aruch, which is generally the opinion of the Sfardim, one is obligated, according to the halacha, to wait 6 hours, while according to the Ramah, for Ashkenazim, the halacha is technically that you don't need to wait 6 hours. You really need to simply start the next meal. Ideally, the Ramah says the custom in his time was to wait 1 hour, And practically today the Ramah says, and many commentaries following the Ramah recommend, that really Ashkenazim also should wait 6 hours. So that's the bottom line today. Most Ashkenazim wait 6 hours, and Sephardim generally all wait 6 hours. There are some individuals that actually have a custom to wait less than 6 hours. They wait 5 hours, 5.5 hours, or a little bit less than 6 hours. And there's a question of exactly where this came from. So some want to suggest that even though the Shulchan Aruch says one should wait 6 hours, the halacha should be that because the Rambam suggests waiting Kimoshe showed about 6 hours, it wasn't an exact measurement. And that was simply because in their times they didn't have stopwatches and phones and calculators and electronic devices the way we did. They used other methods of calculating the time, and therefore it wasn't an exact amount of time between meat and milk. It was a rough estimate. And the idea, again, what the commentaries explain is because we want to make sure that there's no leftover taste of meat in your mouth, or that there's no leftover pieces of meat or poultry in your teeth, and that's sufficient to allow waiting roughly 6 hours. So there are some poskim that say, based on the Rambam, and the Meiri also has a comment where he talks about 5 or 6 hours, that waiting maybe 5.5 hours or a little more than 5 hours is sufficient. Personally, I would suggest that unless you have such a family custom or your personal rabbi tells you that that's what you can do, the more accepted practice is to wait 6 hours in between meat and milk for Ashkenazim, and certainly for Sephardim as well. In the next 7-minute series, we will discuss the more interesting custom, which is some that wait 3 hours. Where did the 3-hour custom come from? And that, as we'll see, is not clear. It does not show up in many of the earlier sources that we discussed right now, and we'll have to see exactly what the basis is for those that wait 3 hours.